And we move on to 4.0, General County Business. The board will consider a request from the Islamic Center of Culpeper for a pump and haul permit on tax map parcel number 31-67 located on Route 229, 14434 Rixeyville Road. Yeah.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, I'll get this introduced for us. This is a request from the Islamic Center of Culpeper for board authorization to apply to the Virginia Department of Health for a pump and haul permit. This case, as you know, was held over last month due to the need to ensure that the pump and haul application, which was submitted, was in order as to legal form. By administrative error, the applicant had previously been provided some outdated application forms which contained some incorrect cites to the Code of Virginia and the Virginia Administrative Code, and that circumstance drew some confusion from our county attorney upon her initial review of the application packet at the meeting last month. This was not her fault or the applicant's fault, but since last month, the proper application packet has been completed. The proposed agreement has been submitted for consideration by the board. Further, it's been verified that the Code of Virginia and the attendant state regulations do permit a contract owner of the property to make this application, and the applicant in this particular case, in fact, does have a contract on the subject property, a copy of which was produced for the county staff just prior to last month's meeting and has since been shared with our county attorney for her review. It's my understanding that closing on the property has still not taken place at this time. The staff and myself met with the applicant after last month's meeting, and he did provide that the intended use of the property includes the demolition of the existing dilapidated structure and the construction of a prayer center. The estimated use of the facility, according to the applicant, is approximately twice per week for a couple of hours with approximately 15 attendees. The estimated water and sewer usage is approximately 17 gallons per day on average, with bathroom facilities being the only and primary source generating water and sewer use. As far as the frequency of pumping this tank, that's unknown at this point. The frequency would of course be dependent upon the actual size of the tank and the actual usage. For example, a 500-gallon holding tank with the estimated usage provided by the applicant in this case would probably result in pumping maybe once a month. The subject property is within a reasonable distance from public utilities. It has the potential that those utilities could become available over the next few years, but not in the immediate future. At the present, the overall process and steps involved in moving forward are generally as follows. The board is asked to authorize the permit as the first step. If it were to be approved, the applicant would have to have an engineer design the pump and haul tank and have those plans submitted and approved by the health department. After that step, the applicant would be required to submit a site plan to the planning department, and that plan would be subject to an administrative approval process in which the plan would not come before the Planning Commission or the board, but it would be subject to review by VDOT and other state agencies and may be subject to required entrance improvements, parking, landscaping, etc. Only if a site plan were then approved would the applicant be eligible to apply for a building permit. So that's kind of the process going forward. To clarify just a couple of things, pump and haul permit applications are not by law subject to public hearing nor review by the Planning Commission. Their consideration are matters of general business for the board's determination. I would share with the board and the folks in the audience that the county did have a mobile home use permit application years ago where the viability of that use of the mobile home was dependent upon the grant of a pump and haul permit, and the mobile home use permit itself was subject to public hearing and Planning Commission review, and I think that case may be the source of confusion for some, but no pump and haul permit application has ever been the subject of a public hearing or referred to the Planning Commission up to this point. The board under state regulations can approve pump and haul permits which are expected to be in use for periods longer than 1 year. Pump and haul permits have been approved in the past which have been long-term. Generally, our pump and haul policy indicates that they are intended to be temporary. A permit as issued is specific to the applicant owner. It cannot simply be transferred for use by a different owner or proposed owner without further approval by the board. Staff researched some of the past pump and haul permits from 1995 to present and found that the board had considered 19 pump and haul permits, approving 18 of those. Our past practice has generally required the applicant to show proof from the health department that no other viable alternative exists. Lastly, Madam Chairman, members of the board, I would just say that if the board has concern about the manner in which these permits have generally been processed in the past and how they should be processed in the future, I would recommend that in the near future the pump and haul policy be referred to the Rules Committee for review and potential amendment. I would certainly welcome the opportunity to work with the Rules Committee and the board on such an update, but I'm not suggesting that we undertake that policy review prior to action on this application. I think that's all the information that I can put in front of you. I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can. The applicant is also present.
All right, I just have one question, Madam Chair, for John. I did have one call from someone who lived really close to the property, and her concern was, is there an odor and does it linger when it's being pumped? Because I guess her husband doesn't leave the house, and that was her only concern, is the odor.
Mrs. Hanson, I really not an expert in that field, but I would share with you that, you know, it's no different than pumping out your septic tank.
Which we're required.
I've had that done at my own house. It's not a pleasant odor when you're standing right next to the guy with the big hose, but it's not something that I think would affect a neighboring property.
So it won't linger after the process?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you. That was her concern.
I got one, John. I don't know whether you can answer this question or not, but alternative systems. There's a lot of alternative systems out there, and I realize that it's limited here as far as how much property that's there to be able to install one of these. But I didn't see a whole lot as far as possibility of installing that type of system, an alternative system.
Mr. Fraser, I would just say that, we did get the letters that the prior property owner had obtained from the health department saying that the soils just wouldn't support what they would consider a traditional type drain field, and no other alternative system was identified by either the health department or the soils consultants that could work here. It's a fairly small property. I don't know that there's a discharge point to have a discharging system, and in terms of some of these mound and other sand systems, it's my understanding they're just not viable.
Well, there's so many new systems out there at the present time that
Yes,
a lot of the new systems don't even require discharge.
That's correct.
And but anyway, just a point I wanted to bring up here
Yes,
before we get into it.
Dry streams out there, I'd looked on that.
Well, like I say, there's systems out now, Bill, where you don't even need that. But
Yeah.
anyway.